Hello and welcome to the University of Limerick. I'm Dr. Sarah Kieran. I am a lecturer in the Department of Work and Employment Studies here in the Chemie Business School, and today I'm here to talk with Nigel Dias about HR Analytics Ireland. We are coming together as part of a global HR Analytics meetup community, and many of you are familiar with this, but just to give you a snapshot of its history and purpose. My friend and colleague Dr. Maria Bellazon of UCD and I started researching in the area of HR analytics around the same time. Both of us had a keen interest in building relationships with people working in this area, other academics, consultants, and HR and data analytics professionals. As our research began to take shape, we created HR Analytics Ireland website and LinkedIn group as a means of reaching out to businesses so we could widen our research opportunities and disseminate our findings. This caught the attention of Nigel, who is founder with 3N Strategy in London, and he introduced us to the concept of meetups. Nigel, can you start by telling us a little bit more about this meetup ecosystem?
Well, maybe if I start off by just describing what I count as a meetup. Now, the way that I describe meetups, and it covers a lot of different groups around the world, what they all have in common is it's always got people who are enthusiastic for the idea of either data, HR data or HR analytics, or at the very least kind of an evidence-based approach to HR. And what you end up in most meetups is people with different backgrounds coming together around that common purpose. And I suppose it's exciting because they're there to share their ideas. Usually meetups are quite a safe space. It's not quite a conference where you don't know who's necessarily going to be there. Meetups tend to happen over and over, and like familiar faces. And what we always say is that when you have as much diversity of thought and of diversity of experience in the room, so when you have people who are industry veterans meeting with HR generalists, meeting with technology professionals, and sometimes meeting with non-HR data people, you throw them into a room, and not only do you find new ways of applying evidence-based decision-making in an HR practice, but we have a greater chance of driving innovation. And if the only thing I'll say about the global ecosystem is that people are creating meetups all over the world. And especially in the last 6 months, we've been able to find more and more and more meetups. And all we've been doing is helping signpost people to say, hey, there's a meetup in your area. Or if you'd like to start a meetup, this is how you do it.
Great, okay. And here we are with our second meetup. And interestingly, in the research that Maria and I have been doing, I'm recognising some of the themes in your opening there. One of them is that we find many different labels of HR analytics, everything from HR analytics to human capital analytics to workforce analytics, and the broader term people analytics, but also the view that this is something quite new, when in reality, as you pointed out, it links back into the concept of evidence-based management, which has been around a long time now. Can you tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that?
I could tell you that I started my first role in what was then the workforce analytics space over 12 years ago. And when I first joined that company, a company called Inform, that company had existed for over 2 decades doing similar stuff. And so as for whether this is new now, yes, okay, there's lots of new labels and new branding, and maybe the topic's quite sexy and cool at the moment. But I think if you take it back to its principle of what are we trying to do, which is we're trying to provide evidence that happens to be data in this case, but we're trying to provide evidence so that an HR or business leader can make a better decision about their workforce. People have been doing that since businesses existed. We've always wanted to make better decisions, and I think, well, at least the way that I approach the practice, that's what I think we're always doing, and I think it's always been around.
Okay, very good. Can I ask you then, you know, I actually worked in the telecoms industry for many years and was engaged in data analytics from a customer perspective over 15, 20 years ago. Even then, there were concerns expressed about how customer data was being used. I'm wondering, specific to people analytics, what your views are on the use of data for people in organizations,
from like an ethical perspective,
etc. Yeah, any perspective.
I suppose if it comes down to ethics, I think if it's just about the collection and analysis of data, that, you know, those are just tools, right? You know, collecting data, analyzing it, visualizing it, those for me are just, those really are just tools. It's how those tools get used where I think the ethics apply. So I personally think anything can be collected as long as there's a reason to do it. Now, I would typically say, especially in the day job, that we would always say you only want to collect data if there's a reason to do it. And the reason would be tied into a decision or a specific question. And therefore, if you know what decision the data is being used for, or if you know the question that the data is being used to ask, then you can kind of tie in the ethics around, is it the right thing to answer that question? Or is it the right thing to make that type of decision? And so that's where I would normally try and differentiate and, you know.
Okay, interesting. And again, in myself and Maria's research, one of the things that we struggled with were all the different key stakeholders across the organisation and the different sources of data across the organisation, coupled with the inputs at different stages of developing that business question and finding the answer. One of the conclusions we came to really is maybe just to give it an overall theme of a HR analytics process that is a critical business process within the organisation, with various perspectives and skill sets having different roles through that process. I'm wondering, do you have any thoughts on that as a view?
The process itself, or specifically in an ethics context?
No, the process itself.
I think, in the way that I think about it, sometimes it's more of a process and sometimes it's less. I think when I think about analytics, and especially if I look at the industry at the moment, the word people analytics or HR analytics, whatever it is, can be anything from a super complex piece of data science all the way down to almost a report that just creates an average. And I'm not going to say one is analytics and one isn't, because I think they are just, you know, a more or less mature version of creating a type of evidence. I would say from a process perspective, it's the job of the analytics function to provide the right decision maker with the right evidence at the right time. Now, sometimes that can be a very simple process of just ensuring a self-service dashboard exists. Sometimes that has to be a highly consultative process where you need to really know the decision-making process and you need to really understand how you're going to take different types of data and how you're going to convert it into a language of impact and things like that. And so I don't know if that counts as a process per se, because like I said, I feel like it's the same thing. One's just more complex, one's more simple. But ultimately, you know, it does come back to that question. And for example, if I describe what I would normally call just decision architecture, if you can understand the way decisions are made about people in your organization, then you can start to work out how to provide the right evidence at the right point in the right way so that that the decision maker can make a better choice. And I suppose if that's the process, then yes, that's how I envision it playing out.
So you've evolved our research with that definition. we might steal that if you don't mind. Okay, that's great. So tomorrow then we are having the HR Analytics meetup here in the University of Limerick. For those that haven't made the session, can I ask you, you're the keynote speaker, if I were to speak initially to a data analytics audience, what do you think the key takeaway for them would be?
I think there's probably lots of takeaways, but I'll pick two. I suppose number one, if it's a data analytics professional who's never seen or worked with HR data before. I hope that they begin to hear and learn more about just the nature of HR data and how it's structured. I think sometimes, and having looked and researched this in other industries, other areas, other data disciplines sometimes have more simplistic data, or at the very least, some of these data scientists don't necessarily realize just how complex HR data can be. You know, the fact that there's multiple histories that go with multiple people that cover everybody who's in the organization that's left. So I hope that they begin to learn that from a technical perspective. And from a wider perspective, there was a great quote from some of the think tank research where the head of analytics, Salvador Malo, I can say his name, he came, and I do agree with him, that it's sometimes easier to teach HR professionals how to use analytics rather than teaching analytics people how to do HR. And I think the real thing to understand there is that obviously number crunching is cool and great, and we all love to do it and get dirty in that, but you have to solve a problem. You have to do the analytics in a context, and HR is our context. So hopefully some of the more analytically minded people who've got their roots in the more technical side of the trade can come and hear about the actual HR context and learn how HR people and processes work.
Okay, and if we look at it from a HR professional perspective, I find this interesting, having been a HR professional for many years. There's a lot of literature out there telling us that HR as a profession is lagging behind other professions such as finance, marketing, sales, and also a lot of literature that points to the barriers to HR analytics, be they HR information systems barriers, just accuracy of data, access to real-time data. There's a lot made about the lack of an analytical skill set in HR. This irks me, this kind of conversation, having been a HR professional. It irks me, and I think that in a way it's creating anxiety around this whole area of HR analytics. I'm wondering, for our HR professional audience, what you think the takeaways tomorrow might be that we can share now.
I've got so many takeaways that I always want HR people to take from these events. I suppose if I pick a few off the top of my head, firstly, I'd hope that HR professionals begin to realise that this isn't the scariest thing in the world. And what I would normally point out, and I'll probably say this tomorrow, is that if you're making a decision, you're already halfway there. Because the truth is, if doing analytics is just about providing you as an HR professional with evidence, then if you're making the decision, then you're already doing most of the work. All the analytics is trying to do is, when you're making that decision, provide you with extra information so that you can make, or increases the chance that you make a better choice. And so when you put it into that context, and again, if you get over the kind of fear factor of the word analytics and you suddenly realize, wait a minute, this is about decision making and I'm already making decisions, then suddenly everything begins to make a lot more sense and click to become a bit more real. Now, that isn't to say that we as HR professionals don't need to develop certain skill sets to encourage our behaviors to become more evidence-based and to remember that this evidence exists, and when you get to the more complex bits of analytics, to understand it a little bit better. But if you can get that first concept, then you're basically there. And like I said, I could probably...
You could talk
I could keep going on that one. But,
okay. Well, I think that's a nice little segue into me thanking you, Nigel Dias, from 3N Strategy. If people want to learn more, I would encourage them to visit the 3N Strategy website and your HR think tank, which is a partnership with academics, or indeed contact myself, Sarah Kieran, here in the University of Limerick, or my colleague Maria Bellizon in UCD. And we have on LinkedIn the HR Analytics Ireland group, which for us is portal for everything we're doing in this space, and we would actively encourage people to link into that and to participate in the conversation. At the moment, we're in planning for Meetup 3, and there's actually a short survey on the HR Analytics Ireland LinkedIn page to allow those listening to let us know what topics they would like us to engage with in future meetups. So for now, thank you very much, Nigel.
Thank you for having me.
We'll hopefully talk to you again soon.
Thanks.